Have you ever heard silence scream, not through noise, but through the way the walls close in when no one calls your name? When the ticking clock is the only thing reminding you that you're still here, and yet no one seems to notice. There's a woman named Eleanor. She lives in a small brick house at the end of a quiet street. She hasn't had visitors in weeks, but every evening she lights one candle, not for light, but for company. It's her way of saying I'm still here, just in case someone forgot. The hardest part isn't the nightfall, it's knowing no one is waiting for you to turn off the lights. She wonders, does anyone think of me when I'm not the one reaching out first? And maybe you've whispered that too. In a quiet room, alone with questions no one's answered. But if you've ever felt that ache, the kind only silence knows how to press what comes next, might be the whisper your soul has needed for years. And even to your old age I am he, and even to hoar hairs will I carry you. Isaiah 46:4 KJV. He didn't promise he'd visit when it's convenient. He said he'd carry you, not walk beside, not stand by. You don't carry what you plan to leave. Eleanor didn't need a sermon. She needed that verse whispered when the hallway echoed empty. She needed to know someone didn't just see her pain, but chose to hold it. And if that verse wrapped around your heart, even a little, stay with me. The next few lines may not just comfort your ears, they may help your hands finally unclench in the dark. Tonight, would you do what Eleanor did? Place your hand on the open Bible and let that touch be a quiet reaching, not to perform, just to be held. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are not too late to be loved. God, if you're still near, would you sit with me tonight? Would you stay until the silence isn't so loud? If this moment felt like someone saw you, you can subscribe not just to follow a channel, but to not miss the next whisper that might be for you. Some say silence is empty, but what if it's been waiting to be filled with peace you've never known? Studies from Harvard 2020 found that loneliness increases mortality risk by 26%. But those who engage with daily spiritual reflection report higher emotional resilience, especially over 60. If you saw yourself in Eleanor, drop a prayer in the comments below. Let others know they're not the only ones lighting candles in the dark. And if this whisper brought peace, wait until the next one. It already knows what your soul will need tomorrow. What if the light you leave on at night isn't just for your comfort, but God's reminder that He still sees you? Eleanor lights a candle every evening. She says it keeps the shadows from feeling too proud. She doesn't do it for mood or scent or habit. She does it because, in her own words, if someone in heaven's passing by, I want them to know I'm still trying. Trying. That word lingers in the air. Trying not to cry when she opens the photo album. Trying to fill dinner plates for one and not feel the ache of two. Trying not to wonder if I were gone, would anyone notice before the weekends? But what if trying isn't the end of the story? What if tonight is the first time something tries to find you? The Lord is nigh unto them that are of a broken heart, and saveth such as be of a contrite spirit. Psalm 34:18, KJV. A broken heart doesn't repel him. It draws him in. Not when you're strong, but when you whisper things only the pillows hear. That's when he's nearest. And if your heart has been too full of pain to speak, stay with me. The next moment may feel like a hand on your back you didn't expect. Imagine this. You walk into a room and it feels less heavy. Not because anything changed, but because someone entered before you. Could you let that be God tonight? You are still seen. You are still safe. You are still surrounded. God, I don't know how to feel held when I can't feel arms. But if you're near, would you wrap peace around me? Even now, if you felt something soften inside, even just a little, subscribe. There's more where that peace came from. Because Eleanor's story doesn't end in candlelight. It moves toward a table, toward a letter, and toward something she thought would never happen again. According to the CDC 2021, loneliness is as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. But spiritual practices can decrease that feeling by up to 32%. If these words felt like they reached your doorstep, drop a quiet, "I'm still here" in the comments. Let someone else know they're not the only one trying. And if this whisper kept you company, wait until the next one. Because someone is already on their way to sit beside your silence. What if the hardest part of aging isn't the body slowing down, but the world no longer looking your way? Eleanor used to be the woman people called for recipes, advice, even directions. Now her phone doesn't ring, and when it does, it's from a clinic or a stranger. She laughs at commercials showing seniors dancing, not because it's funny, but because she can't remember the last time someone touched her shoulder without it being medical. She doesn't fear death. She fears fading. That slow vanishing when your name isn't on anyone's tongue, when your favorite mug goes unused, when the mail carrier doesn't remember your face. And maybe you felt that too. But what if God remembers the things no one else sees? The smile you gave when no one was watching. The sigh you let out when the door clicked shut. Can a woman forget her sucking child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? Yea, they may forget, yet will I not forget thee. Isaiah 49:15, KJV. That verse doesn't say God might remember. It says he won't forget even if the world does. Even if your birthday passes quietly. Even if no one thanks you for the meals you made or the prayers you whispered behind closed doors. And if that verse made you pause, stay. Because what's coming may be the reminder your soul has been starving for. Tonight, imagine your name, not just floating in memory, but written deeply, eternally on the palm of someone who's never let go. What if you are remembered not just by family, but by forever? You are not fading. You are not forgotten. You are not finished. God, when the world grows quiet, remind me, you still speak. And when I feel erased, write me back into your nearness. If this reminded you that your name still matters, you can subscribe. 'Cause there's more remembrance waiting in the next whisper. Eleanor once found something between pages of her Bible a note she didn't write, and what it said changed the way she saw every night that followed. Research from AARP 2020 shows 35% of elderly Americans feel invisible at least once a week, but those who practice nightly scripture reading report 42% higher emotional anchoring. If these words touched where no phone call reached, drop your name in the comments. Not for me, but for the one who already knows it. And if this whisper helped you feel remembered, wait until the next one. Because memory isn't just about recall, it's about presence. Sometimes the loudest moment in the night is when a single piece of paper falls to the floor. That night, Eleanor's hands trembled a bit more than usual. She was reaching for her old Bible, not out of ritual, but because the quiet was too sharp. And when she opened it to a worn page, a folded note slipped out, soft-aged familiar. It was his handwriting, her late husband. She had no memory of placing it there. The note said, "Even when I can't hold your hand, God still can." Eleanor pressed the note to her chest. It didn't stop the tears, but it gave them a place to fall. She hadn't cried in months. Not because she hadn't wanted to, but because there was no one there to say, "It's okay. I see you. And maybe you've stopped crying too." Not because the pain is gone, but because no one seemed to notice when it showed. But what if tonight someone does "I have graven thee upon the palms of my hands. Thy walls are continually before me." Isaiah 49:16. KJV graven, not written with ink. Engraved, as in, he didn't just remember you. He carved you into his presence, your walls, your silence, your sighs. They're always in his line of sight. And if that verse felt like a hand reaching back, stay here, because what comes next may feel like someone just sat beside you on the couch. Imagine your sorrow, not being shushed, not being solved, but simply held, like Eleanor holding that note, like a child holding a promise that hasn't faded with time. You are remembered. You are engraved. You are embraced. God, I've held so much in silence. If you felt something familiar in her trembling hands, you can subscribe. Maybe the next whisper was written for you too, because the note wasn't the end of that night. It led her to something deeper. And what Eleanor found next may be what your soul needs to hear in the dark. If you've ever wanted someone to say, "You don't have to carry this alone," type "still holding on" in the comments. You're not the only one with something folded close to the heart. And if this whisper held your ache for even a moment, wait until the next one. Because some words were left behind just for nights like these. Some nights the shadows don't just fall outside. They gather quietly in your mind. After the note, Eleanor didn't speak aloud, but something inside her softened. She held that Bible close to her chest, not because she was reading it, but because for the first time in weeks, she felt held. She didn't need more verses. She needed to know one verse still wanted her. She whispered, "If you still want me, then I'll stay here. I'll wait." It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. But heaven hears the whispers no one else does. Have you ever prayed without sound, just breath? just the ache, hoping it's heard. If you've ever prayed like that, what comes next might not be words, but presence. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. KJV, be still. Not perform, not pretend, just stay. Because knowing doesn't come by effort. It comes when you stop hiding. Eleanor didn't need an answer. She needed someone to stay while the question hung in the air. And if that verse gave your breath a reason to slow, stay just a moment more. There's something in stillness that rushing will never reveal. Tonight, close your eyes not to sleep, but to open something deeper. Picture yourself not as abandoned, but as someone God hasn't left in a long time. Not once. You don't have to perform. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to be alone tonight. God, I don't have words anymore. Just stillness. Would you fill it with yourself? If this moment felt like your soul exhaled, you can subscribe. Sometimes the next whisper is softer, but stronger. Because what Eleanor does next might be the turning point you didn't know you needed. If this part let you breathe again, drop A in the comments. Let someone scrolling know peace still happens here. And if this whisper quieted something in you, wait until the next one. Sometimes peace doesn't come loudly. It comes faithfully. Some people think nightfall brings sleep, but for some, it brings a quiet battle. At 2:47 a.m., Eleanor sat up in bed, not from noise, but from a heaviness that didn't come from outside. She looked to the empty space beside her, that same spot she'd glanced at every night for the past 6 years. And though no words came, her tears told the truth. Loneliness doesn't always feel like absence. Sometimes it feels like a weight. She'd gotten used to making it through the day, but the night, that's when the questions returned. Why am I still here? What's the point? If no one needs me, not suicidal, just wondering if her life had already been lived, and the rest was just waiting. But what if the part you thought was left over was the part heaven saved for something sacred? Even to your old age I am he, and even to hoar hairs will I carry you. Isaiah 46:4 KJV, again by need. He didn't say I'll visit. He didn't say I'll help once. He said I'll carry you, not until you're stronger, not if you're useful, but because you're still mine. Eleanor lay back down. She didn't sleep yet, but she whispered, "Carry me then." And if that whisper felt like one you've said too, what comes next might hold your breath just long enough to steady your soul. Tonight, if lying down feels like surrender, let it be. Not giving up, but giving in to being carried. Imagine the bed not as a battlefield, but as his arms. You are not a burden. You are not forgotten. You are not past the point of being held. God, I don't know how to ask anymore, but if you still carry the tired, I'm here. If that image being carried felt like a relief, you can subscribe. The next whisper may carry something you didn't know you still needed. Because Eleanor's next step wasn't planned. It came from something she hadn't touched in years. A memory, a melody, and a letter. If you've ever laid awake wondering why you're still here, drop "still here, still held" in the comments. Not just for you, but for someone else scrolling quietly, breaking. And if this whisper steadied your midnight, wait until the next one. It may be where your dawn begins. There are nights when you don't cry, not because it doesn't hurt, but because the silence has taught you how to keep it in. Eleanor stood in her kitchen barefoot. The linoleum was cool beneath her feet. Same pattern since 1984. She looked at the stove. She hadn't cooked for 2 years, but she still set the salt and pepper side by side. Not for use, but because he used to pass them to her without asking. That night the candle flickered differently, like it remembered too. She whispered, "I don't know who I am without being someone's someone." It wasn't drama. It was memory aching to be more than nostalgia. A woman who gave nurtured, remembered birthdays, now standing alone with a pan she no longer used. Maybe you've stood in that same kitchen. Or maybe your pan looks like a voicemail never played. A drawer full of cards no one opens anymore. But what if what feels like leftovers is holy ground? What if God doesn't need you to move on? Just invite Him into what's still there. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34:18. NEV, not He visits, He's close. Like someone sitting across the kitchen table not saying much, just being there while you butter toast in silence. If that thought, God in your kitchen, touched something soft, stay. Because the next whisper may walk with you down a hallway you haven't entered in years. Tonight, keep the light on in the room you avoid. Not to clean, not to confront, just to let God walk in first. Even grief leaves fingerprints on doorknobs. He touches those too. You are still known. You are still welcome. You are still home to someone. God, if you remember the way this room used to feel, could you sit with me in it again? If this moment felt like someone walked with you through memory, you can subscribe. The next whisper may hold the sound you've missed for years. Because Eleanor's next step isn't just about remembering. It's about what happens when the past writes a letter to the present. If you've ever kept something small, just to remember love, drop "still remembering" in the comments. Let others know they're not the only ones with sacred clutter. And if this whisper felt like a warm light in an old room, wait until the next one. Some echoes aren't haunting, they're holy. Have you ever opened a drawer and felt it breathe? Not because of what's inside, but because of what it remembers. That morning, Eleanor didn't plan on going near that drawer, the one under the old telephone table. But the candle's flame had gone out, and for some reason, she reached for the matches. She hadn't touched that drawer in years. Inside were bits of a life that once moved fast. A bus pass, a thank you card from a student, a letter never opened. It had her name on it, written in handwriting she hadn't seen since his final week. Her hand trembled, not because she feared the contents, but because she feared what it might wake in her. Grief doesn't always hit like a storm. Sometimes it knocks gently, asking, can I still live here? Maybe you have a drawer like that too, or a song, or a scent, or a photo frame still facing the wall. But what if grief isn't trying to haunt you, but to lead you somewhere holy? He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147, 3 KJV. He doesn't rush, he doesn't erase, he binds. As in, he stays close long enough to hold the wound together so it can close slowly, kindly. That letter in the drawer wasn't an accident. It was timing. So is this. And if you've left something unread, not because you forgot, but because you couldn't stay, what comes next may help you open it, not with fear, but with grace. Tonight, you don't have to sort, you don't have to fix, you don't even have to read. Just let God open the drawer. Sit beside him. Let what rises, rise. You don't have to rush. You don't have to hide. You don't have to go through it alone. God, I've kept some things locked away for too long. If you're ready, I'll let you open it first. If this felt like a hand reaching gently toward something you buried, subscribe. The next whisper might turn the page you've been afraid to touch. Because inside that letter, Eleanor found a sentence she didn't expect, and it didn't bring back pain. It brought purpose. If you've ever left something unopened, drop still holding in the comments. You're not the only one with drawers full of unspoken things. And if this whisper helped you breathe while remembering, wait until the next one. Some letters were written for the day you're finally ready. Some sentences aren't meant to explain. They're meant to stay until the silence is ready to listen. Eleanor finally opened the letter. She expected a goodbye, or instructions, or a memory she wasn't ready for. But it was one sentence. If you're reading this, then I trust that God got you here. No drama, no signature, just trust. As if he knew her ache would return, and as if he believed something stronger would be waiting when it did. She sat in the kitchen. No music, no clock ticking. Just that sentence, and the weight of being seen by someone who could no longer see her. She whispered, I don't know if I'm here because I'm strong, or because I'm too tired to fall. And maybe you've never said that out loud. Maybe you've told everyone I'm fine, but some part of you is still just trying to breathe. But what if your breath, even the shaky kind, is sacred? Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28 KJV. He didn't say try harder. He didn't say fix it first. He said come, not strong, not polished, just as you are. Even Eleanor's tears felt different that day. Not because they stopped, but because they had somewhere to fall. If that verse felt like an invitation, not to do more, but to rest where you are stay. Because what comes next might help you lay down what you were never meant to carry. Tonight, imagine rest, not as sleep, but as exhale. Not because everything is fixed, but because you stopped believing you had to hold it all alone. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to weep. You are allowed to not be okay tonight. God I've carried so much without saying a word. Can I hand it to you? Even if my hands still shake, if this felt like something you've been waiting years to hear, you can subscribe. The next whisper may finally say the thing you've never told anyone, because what Eleanor finds next wasn't in the drawer or the letter, but in something she hadn't done in a long time, and it involved her voice. If you stop watching here, you might miss the part where her silence turns into a song. But if you stay, you might remember how your own voice once sounded when it wasn't afraid. If you've ever kept words inside because no one felt safe enough to hear them drop, still breathing in the comments, you're not the only one who needs space to speak. And if this whisper gave your ache a place to rest, wait until the next one. Some words don't heal because they're perfect. They heal because they're finally heard. There's a sound more healing than music. It's the moment your own voice comes back, after being quiet for too long. Later that day, Eleanor did something she hadn't done in years. She hummed. Not a song from church, not a hymn, just a tune she used to hum while folding laundry, when the house was full and the air smelled like dinner. She didn't even realize she was doing it until the room felt different, lighter, like someone was listening. She paused, almost embarrassed by her own sound. I don't even know why that came out, she whispered. Then she laughed, soft, surprised, as if her soul had slipped something past her mouth before her mind could stop it. Have you ever caught yourself almost smiling, then stopped because it felt wrong to feel okay? But what if that small hum, that tiny flicker of joy, wasn't random but sacred? The Lord thy God in the midst of thee is mighty. He will save. He will rejoice over thee with joy. He will rest in his love. He will joy over thee with singing. Zephaniah 3:17, KJV. He sings over you, not because you're loud, but because you're loved. Eleanor's hum wasn't a performance. It was her heart remembering. It's still allowed to feel alive. If your soul has been silent for too long, stay, because the next whisper may help you remember the sound of your own hope. Tonight you don't need lyrics. You don't need volume. Just breathe and let the sound come from somewhere soft inside. Even a sigh can be a song when God hears it. You are still alive. You are still heard. You are still allowed to sing. God, if you've been waiting for my voice, here I am. Even if it's just a whisper, will you sing back? If your breath felt different during this, subscribe, because the next whisper might help you turn it into a prayer. Eleanor didn't just hum that day. She opened something else, not a drawer, but a window. And what came in felt like an answer she didn't know she'd prayed for. If you leave now, you might miss the moment where something enters her home that hasn't been there in years. But if you stay, you might realize what you need isn't gone. It's just waiting to be let in. If your voice has been quiet for too long, drop, still humming in the comments. Let someone else know they're not the only one finding their sound again. And if this whisper brought back something gentle, wait until the next one, because sometimes peace enters through the smallest open window. Some air doesn't just carry breeze, it carries memory and something sacred we forgot, we missed. Eleanor opened the kitchen window. She hadn't touched it since the fall he passed, not out of fear, out of habit, as if keeping it shut kept everything inside from changing. But that morning, after humming after the letter, after the stillness, her hand reached for the lock. It clicked open with a sound softer than she remembered, and the air that rushed in wasn't cold. It was familiar, like cinnamon, like autumn, like the way his coat used to smell. She stood there, eyes closed, face turned toward the light, and whispered, "I forgot what this felt like." Sometimes it's not pain that keeps us stuck. It's numbness. The fear that feeling again will break what's barely holding us together. Maybe you've kept a window closed too. Not because you don't want change, but because you don't want to ache again. But what if that ache is where the healing breath begins? The wind bloweth where it listeth, so is everyone that is born of the Spirit. John 3:8, KJV. The wind doesn't ask permission. It just comes, quiet, soft, but always purposeful. Sometimes the Spirit doesn't thunder. It just drifts in through the window you finally trusted enough to open. If that image felt like something shifting in you, stay. Because what comes next might be the first time you welcome something since they left. Tonight, open a window, real or imagined. Let the Spirit come in through the ache. Let the breeze find the part of you forgot was still alive. You're still reachable. You're still soft enough to breathe. You're still open, even if just a little. God, I opened the window. Now, could you come in? If something felt lighter in you just now, subscribe. The next whisper may ride in on the same wind, because what entered Eleanor's house next wasn't air, it was sound. A note, a memory, and a voice she hadn't heard in a very long time. If you leave now, you might miss the sound that changed everything. But if you stay, you may hear something your soul's been waiting for since goodbye. If you've ever kept a window closed, not to stay safe, but to stay numb, drop "still opening" in the comments. This space is safe for slow awakenings. And if this whisper carried something through to you, wait until the next one. Because some winds don't just enter, they call something back to life. Sometimes the past doesn't knock, it sings. And it doesn't need lyrics, just one note to find you. That afternoon, the wind carried more than breeze. Through the open window, a sound floated in. Faint, old, a melody from a record she hadn't played in over a decade. She froze. It wasn't coming from a neighbor. It wasn't the radio. It was just there. She leaned closer to the window, heart pounding not from fear, but from memory. That song was the one he hummed every Sunday morning as he brewed coffee and kissed her forehead. She whispered, "I thought I forgot how it sounded." And maybe you've forgotten too. Not because you wanted to, but because it hurt less to pretend it never existed. The way their voice rose when they laughed. The way your name sounded in their mouth. Sometimes we don't lose people, we just bury the echoes too deep to hear. But what if some echoes aren't haunting? What if they're holy? My sheep hear my voice and I know them, and they follow me. John 10:27. KJV. God's voice isn't always loud. Sometimes it wears the clothes of memory. A note, a scent, a flicker of a song you thought time erased. Eleanor didn't cry. She didn't even move. She just whispered, "Thank you." Because maybe it wasn't just nostalgia. Maybe it was permission to feel again. If this part made something stir, and you stay, because what Eleanor does next might be what your soul has been scared to do too. Tonight, don't fight the memory. Let it play. Let it breathe. Even if it aches. Because maybe it's not pulling you backward. Maybe it's pulling you home. You can remember and still heal. You can ache and still move forward. You can miss and still be whole. God, if that sound was you, do it again. Just once more. So I know I didn't imagine hope. If that sound, real or remembered, felt like comfort, subscribe. The next whisper might help you turn it into peace. Because Eleanor didn't just listen. She followed the sound. And where it led was a room she hadn't entered since the funeral. If you stop here, you may never find out what was waiting in that room. But if you stay, you might discover that the place you've avoided might be the place God has already made safe. If you've ever heard something you didn't expect but needed more than anything, drop. Still listening in the comments. You're not alone in hearing whispers from home. And if this whisper brought a melody back to life, wait until the next one. Because the music isn't over, just softer than before. Some rooms don't just hold furniture. They hold breath still waiting to be exhaled. She stood at the doorway. That room hadn't been opened in 6 years. It wasn't locked, just paused. Like the world had stopped inside it and only time outside kept moving. The bed was still made. The sweater still folded. The slippers tucked under the chair where he used to sit. Reading, humming, asking how her day was. She placed her hand on the doorknob, and it felt warm. Not from the sun, but from something she couldn't explain. She whispered, "If I open this door, am I letting him go?" Maybe you've wondered that too. If moving forward means betrayal, if healing means forgetting, if laughter after grief is disloyalty, the truth is, you're not choosing to forget. You're choosing to live the love deeper than memory. But what if that room isn't a tomb, but a temple? Surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. Genesis 28:16, KJV. Sometimes we think God only enters new beginnings, but He's already inside the rooms you've sealed shut. Waiting, not rushing, just being until you're ready. And when you finally walk in, He doesn't ask why it took so long. He says, "I've been here the whole time." If this made your breath catch, stay. Because what Eleanor does next might help you take your next quiet step too. Tonight, picture the room you've been afraid to enter. Not physically, maybe emotionally. A memory, A what if, a goodbye never spoken. Now, imagine God already inside, turning the light on, dusting the windows, holding the sweater you couldn't touch. You're not dishonoring the past by healing. You're not alone in walking back in. You're not forgotten in your pause. God, if you're already in that room, I'll open the door. Just stay. Please stay. If that picture made something shift in your chest, subscribe. The next whisper may walk with you into what you feared to face. Because Eleanor doesn't just step in. She finds something there, not a thing, a truth. And it sounds like a voice she forgot was still allowed to speak. In a 2022 study by Harvard Medical School elderly individuals who gently re-engaged with spaces linked to grief, reported 33% higher emotional stability than those who avoided them. But it wasn't the space. It was what they found inside stillness that felt safe. If there's a room in your life you've never walked back into, drop. Still opening doors in the comments. Let's remind each other, healing doesn't mean forgetting. And if this whisper helped you place your hand on that doorknob, wait until the next one. Because what Eleanor finds behind that silence is something your soul might be waiting for too. Some silences don't need to be broken, they need to be answered. And sometimes that answer sounds like your own voice coming back. Eleanor sat on the bed. She didn't touch anything. She didn't rearrange. She simply sat, alighted the corner of the room, just like it used to. And without meaning to, she spoke, out loud. I miss you. No tears, no drama. Just a truth finally released into the air. The room didn't echo. It received. And in the silence, after, she heard something. Not a voice, not a sound, but a release. Like her own voice had been waiting for permission. She whispered, I thought saying it would undo me, but it just let me be. Maybe you've been holding something in for years too. Words meant for someone gone. Feelings you buried because no one else could hold them. And maybe it's time not to perform, but to speak, to let your heart stretch, even if the only one listening is heaven. But what if saying it finally isn't weakness, but worship? I poured out my complaint before him. I showed before him my trouble. Psalm 142, 2 KJV. David didn't clean up his words. He poured them, raw, messy, true. And God didn't flinch. He listened. He stayed. Eleanor's voice didn't wake the dead. It woke her. The version of her that stopped speaking when loss entered. And now, that voice had found breath again. If you've held back your truth for too long, stay. Because what Eleanor says next isn't for the one who's gone, but the one who's still here herself. Tonight, find a quiet place, sit, and whisper what you've never dared say, aloud. You don't need an audience, only honesty, and a God who's never stopped listening. You are still heard. You are still safe. You are still allowed to speak. God, I've been quiet for so long, but if you're still listening, this is me saying it now. If you whispered anything during this moment, subscribe. The next whisper might help you say the one thing you've always held back. Because Eleanor's next words aren't to the one she lost, but to the life she's ready to begin. And that changes everything. If you pause here, you may never hear what Eleanor finally says to herself, the truth that turned mourning into movement. But if you stay, you might speak the same words into your mirror one day and feel peace settle like never before. If you've ever kept words in because the silence felt safer, drop, still finding my voice in the comments. Let this space echo with voices finally coming home. And if this whisper helped you speak again, even softly, wait until the next one, because the final word might be the first one you've needed all along. Sometimes the most powerful words are the ones you say to yourself, but healing deepens when someone else finally hears them too. She stood before the mirror, not to fix her hair, not to check her reflection, but to say something. She placed one hand on her heart and one on the mirror frame, as if anchoring herself to both body and soul. And then she spoke. I still miss you, but I'm not lost anymore. I'm still here, and I'm still becoming. No spotlight, just stillness and a woman finally hearing her own truth. She didn't say it for closure. She said it because the truth isn't meant to hide. It's meant to breathe, to ripple, to remind. Maybe you have something too. A whisper waiting to be written. A sentence that becomes real when someone else sees it. But what if your sentence is the breath someone else has been holding? Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Psalm 107:2 KJV. It doesn't say, let them think so. It says, say, because healing becomes holy when shared. And sometimes you're not saying it for you. You're saying it for the next soul who's afraid to speak. If your voice has been quiet for too long, this space might be the soft landing it's needed. Imagine the comments below as more than text. They're windows, each one a quiet light, each one a soul whispering, me too. You are not too late. You are not too quiet. You are not alone in the room. God, if there's something in me that still needs to be said, help me trust that someone out there needs to hear it too. If this whisper felt like the softest part of you was heard, subscribe. The next one might say aloud the thing you've never been able to name. Because Eleanor doesn't just speak, she writes something down. And what she writes might be what someone else has waited years to read. If you leave now, you might miss the moment your own words become someone's healing. But if you stay, you might realize you were never just watching. You were part of this. So if this really reached you, type your truth in the comments. It doesn't have to be long. It can start like this, still healing, still learning to breathe, still believing. Or write the sentence your heart's been holding alone. Someone else may read it and finally exhale. And if this whisper gave you something no one saw, wait until the next one. I'll still be here when you're ready to hear what only heaven could have written.